And was he not so? Asked the abbé. Gaspard, murmured the woman from her seat on the stairs. Mind what you're saying. Caderousse made no reply to these words, though evidently irritated and annoyed by the interruption, but, addressing the abbé, said, Can a man be faithful to another whose wife he covets and desires for himself? But Dante was so honorable and true in his own nature that he believed everybody's professions of friendship. Poor Edmond, he was cruelly deceived. But it was fortunate that he never knew, or he might have found it more difficult, when on his deathbed, to pardon his enemies. And whatever people may say, continued Caderousse, in his native language, which was not altogether devoid of rude poetry, I cannot help being more frightened at the idea of the malediction of the dead than the hatred of the living. Imbecile! Exclaimed La Carconte. Do you, then, know in what manner Fernand injured Dante? Inquired the abbé of Caderousse. Do I? No one better. Speak out, then. Say what it was. Gaspard, cried La Carconte. Do as you will. You are the master. But if you take my advice, you'll hold your tongue. Well, wife, replied Caderousse, I don't know but what you're right. So you will say nothing? Asked the abbé. Why, what good would it do? Asked Caderousse. If the poor lad were living, and came to me and begged that I would candidly tell which were his true and which were his false friends, why, perhaps, I should not hesitate. But you tell me he is no more, and therefore can have nothing to do with hatred or revenge. So let all such feeling be buried with him. Okay. Now, how vitriolic do I want to get here? If you listen to our other podcasts, there's a certain name that when evoked tends to draw my ire. And I'm gonna be on my best behavior here and just point out that this whole exchange, I mentioned it in regard to the Lee Van Cleef opening of The Good and the Bad and the Ugly. Well, there is a particular filmmaker out there who loves Sergio Leone, loves The Good and the Bad and the Ugly, and has used that scene in one of his own films to his own use. I'm talking about Tarantino, and I'm talking about the opening to Inglourious Bastards. This whole sequence, this whole chapter, really feels a lot like Christoph Waltz talking to the countryman who is hiding refugees under his floorboards. And there's what develops in that scene is the same that develops in The Good and the Bad and the Ugly, which is the same as it feels like it's developing here, which is that this kind of back and forth conversation then turns into an interrogation, and then just kind of feels like it develops into this suspenseful, when is the shoe going to drop? When is the, like, it's building to an act of violence, it feels like. Through all of these little, mental pivots that each character does, it seems like Caderousse here is doing it, kind of unintentionally. He doesn't know he's speaking to Dante. It's Dante. I know it's Dante. You can't fool me anymore. And the kind of dramatic irony that Dumas is bringing out by that last paragraph of Caderousse saying, well, if he was alive, I would tell you, but since he's dead, he can't have his revenge. He can't express his hatred. So what's the point? But we know the difference. We know the difference, Caderousse, because he is alive and he's standing right in front of you, pretending to be an abbé. I know it for sure now. So I said I was going to be on my best behavior with Tarantino. Oh boy. The fact remains that there is an undeniable connection between Tarantino and Dumas. The thing that bothers me about Tarantino, and I'm not gonna get on a soapbox, it's just that there's been a little, in my estimation, a little too much emphasis placed on what the fuck he cares about anything in the world and why we give that any credence. I also don't feel like he is very good at acknowledging when he is directly taking reference of other things, and we are so quick to attribute to him the brilliance of the opening of Inglourious Bastards. Now, I'm not going to say it's not effective. I'm not going to say that, it's not impactful and influential, but there is precedence to it. And, you can look at Leone, who, he certainly calls out, if not directly influencing certain sequences, just generally he does. But he also, has a connection to Dumas because he has voiced his appreciation for the Richard Lester Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers that came right after it. And he is, what frustrates me is that he gets, because we put so much emphasis on what he thinks and cares about anything, his kind of crass way of approaching things sometimes is like dangerously dismissive. So he's been on record saying that one of his favorite films is The Man in the Iron Mask from 1939, and that when he went to go read the book, he was very dismissive of it, saying that it was boring and just terrible. I'm going to, here, instead of just paraphrasing, I'm going to read the actual quote because I'm not going to do what he does. He says, and I quote, and this is from Far Out magazine, quote, "Because I like the story so much and I like a couple other versions of it, I decided to read the book," Tarantino continued. "The book is fucking terrible." It's just like, I'm not saying things are above criticism. I mean, we've even encountered a handful of moments here on this show where it does feel like Dumas is striving just to get that page count up in order to reach those serialization quotas. It's such a classic literature is already, a dying appreciation. It's hard enough to get people to read, and it's even harder to get people to read the classics. And so when you get someone like this who has taken inspiration from the classics like this, to just outright be dismissive of it in that way is so utterly enraging to me. I mean, he's entitled to his opinion, but we have elevated his opinion beyond that of the normal person. And anyway, I'm getting way off topic here, and I said I'd be on my best behavior. My point being that I don't think you can read this scene and not see how it affects certain sequences in cinema that play out through, the influence of today and the movies we are currently seeing. What else do I want to talk about here? It does feel like Caderousse is a little bit superstitious, because when he says that he's more concerned about the malediction of the dead, this could be like indication, not outright admission on Caderousse's part, but indication that he has a guilty soul. He's now that he's thinking that Dante is dead, he is saying, I'm more worried about not having absolved my sins or made things right with a specific person. Therefore, I'm always going to be haunted by this idea that I did Dante wrong. Now, that's just a thought. I don't see anything in this passage that indicates remorse, just like, oh, yeah, just recognition. So is that going to factor into what Dante is going to choose to do with him? And also that Caderousse is withholding the story, I feel like that can't continue, right? I mean, or maybe it will. Maybe Dumas, like I said, Dumas continually surprises me on this show. So how interesting would it be for Dumas to acknowledge that Caderousse is the only person who holds a specific part of the story and then deny that to the readers? And we have to kind of pick up the pieces from maybe other stories that we get moving forward. What do we think Dante is going to do here? That's my big question. As we start to conclude this chapter with only 3 more episodes left, is Dante going to exact vengeance on him via, murder? Is he going to make a example out of Caderousse? Is he going to leave him a message, hoping that it gets to Danglars and Fernand for that matter? I don't know. I really, truly don't know. But there's only one way to find out, as we say at the end of most of these episodes, and that's to continue. So join me here tomorrow as we barrel toward the end of chapter 26. I think I said 25 earlier. We're in 26. Until then, okay, you know where to find me, right here. Okay, goodbye. The Countdown of Monte Cristo is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. This show is produced, edited, and hosted by Landon Solano. The original text of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Theme song by Magic Solo. If you want to support the show and others like it, visit patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.